This is the Fed Challenge 2022, and we're going to be talking about the synopsis of the current economic conditions. My name is Sarab Adhikari.
My name is Jake Everett.
My name is Connery Martin.
My name's Russell Springer.
My name's Alex McCray.
So this slide specifically talks about the real gross domestic product of the years 2021 and 2022. This report was released in September 29, 2022. And this is specifically talking about the percent change from the preceding quarter. The first quarter of the year 2022, real GDP decreased by annual rate of 1.6%. The second quarter of the year 2022, real GDP decreased by the annual rate of 0.06%, which is a 0.54% change. High inflation in gas in quarter one reduced customer spending on expenses, and higher exports and customer spending allowed quarter two to rise above real GDP of quarter one. Economic impact on inflation will keep the high prices on goods, but should decline and steady out in the long run. This should result in an erosion in salaries and incomes, meaning the value of nation's economy is declining in the short run. This specifically talks about the mortgage rates and on the 30-year mortgage rates. And this report was released on September 28th of 2022. You could see the rapid spike in inflation that has caused interest rates to spike unexpectedly high. So comparing from August 2022, you could see that the inflation rate, or the mortgage rate, was just between 3 and 4%, whereas in September 22, it's going well past almost 7%. So that's almost on a path of 100% increase. Mortgages are approximately 6.73% in September 2022. And once the decline in GDP takes effect and overall interest rates increase, mortgage rates should level off. So this trend shouldn't be for everything. It should be leveling off.
So this is the monetary policy to date. Amid our recent economic predicament, the Fed has made several changes to their monetary policy in the past months and years. During the pandemic, the Fed chose, according to its monetary policy rules, to sharply decrease interest rates and similarly stimulate the economy through increased lending operations. This marked increase in loaning and spending kept consumption levels high amid economic downturn. This trend has continued even after such actions ceased in June of 2022. So more recently, as projections of the US economy strengthened, the Fed has risen interest rates to pre-pandemic levels and cut their balance sheet significantly. These changes reflect the Fed's confidence that the economy is still strong, even considering ongoing labor and commodity supply shortages due to its current international events. A cutback in Fed spending replaces previous discouragements involved in borrowing and lending that had previously been mitigated or eliminated since 2020. This then puts pressure on financial institutions to return to pre-pandemic lending habits and rolls back the economic stimulation put in place to reduce the economic impact of the pandemic. As the stimulation slows, so too does its direct effect on inflation through the money supply. But there are many sources cited for egregious recent inflation rates beyond the money supply and outside of the control of national monetary policy.
The real effects of monetary policy are real. As consumer prices soar along with agriculture and energy prices, there is a clear role for the Fed to play. With real GDP finally beginning to stabilize, the Fed can more accurately use their tools to address inflation. These tools are useful for addressing inflation and include those of retractionary measures in which the Fed reduces the money supply both directly and indirectly. They have done so by rapidly recurring pre-pandemic levels of interest rates and Fed spending. This directly caused a decrease in available money through cuts in the Fed's budget and also directly discouraged banks from borrowing money, which in turn discouraged them from lending it. As bank lending habits slow, it puts downward pressure on consumer spending habits as well as commercial investments, with an aim to ultimately curb aggregate demand to an extent. The Federal Open Market Committee of the FOMC has put downward pressure on our recently recovered economy. Its purpose is to acutely recognize the significant hardship caused by elevated inflation, especially in those least able to meet the higher cost of essentials. That was expressed in the monetary policy report this year. As the entire world grapples with global inflation, governments of all sizes have begun to tighten their monetary policies. It is our fear that in the process of addressing inflation, we might fall back into a slight recession. This impact will not be evenly distributed across the country, however, as households and small businesses who are already struggling with current prices will be forced, along with everyone else, to cut back even further.
So this effect will be disproportionate on low-income families and struggling small businesses because Americans that are already struggling to deal with increased consumer prices will be hit particularly hard in the event of any broad reduction in demand. And those who have already been pushed to their spending limits will have to find ways to further decrease their budget even more. Notably, the Phillips curve does not hold up given current economic conditions. It states that inflation and unemployment are proportional and inverse, but that statement is proved false in and of the simple existence of the stagflation that we're currently seeing, where inflation and unemployment are starkly not inversely proportional, as with the Great Recession and the Great Depression before us. Since this is now a recognized phenomenon that invalidates the Phillips curve at the very least for periods of stagflation, it has no bearing on the situation at hand. Throughout the past years, many companies in the US have severely cut production due to hiring shortages, increased production costs, and supply chain difficulties due to global events. American businesses that are struggling with rapidly rising production costs and sharply increasing wages will similarly be deeply affected disproportionately to larger, more developed organizations with the means to stay afloat. Several sectors of the economy have been hit particularly hard by recent global events, COVID-19 withstanding. A war in Ukraine has restricted the flow of wheat, fertilizer, semi-precious metals, and energy from Russia and Ukraine that have adversely affected production costs globally across the board. To address this, the US has stepped up its natural gas exports to fuel Europe in Russia's absence. This increase in global demand has nearly doubled its price domestically, according to the Henry Hub spot price, as compared to 2021. China also recently shut down the entire area of Shanghai in response to the sudden surge of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. This caused an unprecedented decline in their industrial production and has sent shockwaves through the commodity market and further disrupted international supply lines. The marked increase in food and fertilizer prices has severely affected the agricultural economy in the US and around the world. The lack of metals previously sourced from Russia and Ukraine has reintroduced shortages in computer chip production materials, and in turn has raised prices of a wide array of electronics such as phones, computers, and cars. The marked increase of energy prices further disproportionately affects the manufactured goods market by contributing to severely increased prices for operating, transportation, and shipping, even beyond those that were already introduced through previous supply chain shortages and increased production costs.
A recommendation. When considering potential courses of action regarding monetary policy, it is important to remember that the fiscal actions of Congress play a large role in the financial well-being of particular groups of individuals, and unlike the Fed, they have tools at their disposal that can accurately target groups demographically to, at their discretion, mitigate or unexpectedly exacerbate recession and/or inflation. On the congressional side of fiscal policy, there have been many promises from the federal government as to what we can expect in the near future. The Biden administration intends to start several new programs that are aimed at directly and indirectly addressing inflation. Executive action on student debt cancellation, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the American Rescue Plan are but a few of the many measures that this administration is taking to address inflation. Notably, these steps will further increase personal and business taxes and thereby restrict the economy by decreasing the available funds of individuals. The Federal Reserve should begin to slow down interest rate hikes due to the signs of the economy already slowing down. While job data is still positive, it is mainly just recovering from companies cutting too many jobs in the outbreak of the pandemic. In tandem with congressional policy targeting inflation, inflation is showing signs of decreasing. Job data itself is already showing signs of slowing down, as there are 10% fewer job openings from the month of September from the month before. Companies are reaching pre-pandemic levels of employment, meaning crossroads approaching where the impacts of the interest rate hikes will finally be reflected in the labor force. The Fed should start a proportional decrease of the interest rate hikes leading up to the end of the year, of which the Fed funds rate should be 4.2%. This is actually in harmony with the current plan the Federal Reserve has, as stated in their most recent minutes. Thank you for listening to our presentation.